The Helmand Valley stretched endlessly beneath the pale morning sun, a barren landscape of dust, rock, and jagged mountains that seemed to pierce the sky. The wind stirred sand into thin clouds, carrying the faint metallic tang of conflict and the dryness of a land untouched by rain for months. On a small plateau overlooking the valley, the rangers assembled, rifles slung, faces half hidden beneath goggles and tan scarves. Their mission was supposedly routine: gather intelligence on a nearby village, report back, and leave before dusk. Yet, as the wind tugged at their uniforms and the hot air shimmered above the ground, unease settled like a weight on their shoulders. Captain Reynolds, a veteran hardened by years in combat, paced the edge of the plateau. Each step stirred dust into small swirls around his boots. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the valley below. Orders were clear: reconnaissance, not engagement. Still, instinct whispered that the valley was not empty. He adjusted the strap on his radio pack and muttered, "Stay alert. Nothing about this feels right." He cast a glance at his team, lingering on one soldier in particular. Corporal Sarah Jennings, the unit's sniper, crouched silently with her rifle resting against her shoulder. She had earned her place through skill, focus, and unyielding resolve, though many had doubted her because of her gender. Today, she would prove her worth once more. The helicopters overhead kicked up a cloud of dust as they lifted off, leaving the rangers standing in silence. Sarah's eyes flicked to the village below, scanning rooftops, alleys, and walls for any hint of life. Her scope became an extension of her senses. Movement caught instantly in the lens. Even in silence, she could sense the tension vibrating through the squad. Sweat ran down her neck, and her boots sank slightly into the sand as she moved forward, silently counting steps, ensuring each footfall was measured, controlled. The desert held its secrets close, and Sarah intended to uncover them. Captain Reynolds broke the silence. "In and out, keep it tight. Eyes open, weapons ready. Stick to your sectors." His words carried the weight of authority, but behind them lingered the shadow of fear. He had led countless operations, yet there was something about this valley, something that set his instincts on edge. The squad moved out in single file, boots crushing the gravelly earth. Dust swirled around them, ghosting the terrain, hiding hazards and threats alike. Every step was deliberate. Every movement could be fatal. Hours passed with uneasy calm. The village below appeared deserted. The rangers whispered to each other sparingly, aware that sound carried too far. Sarah crouched behind a low wall, adjusting her scope, noting slight shifts in shadows. The desert had a rhythm, and she had learned to read it. Every twitch of the sand, every flicker on a rooftop, was a potential threat. Her heart beat steadily, her mind honed to precision. This was more than reconnaissance. It was survival in its rawest form. And then it happened. A shot cracked across the valley, sharp and sudden. Bullets began to tear through the walls, striking sand and stone, echoing off the canyon's edges. The rangers dove for cover, scrambling behind walls, boulders, and abandoned vehicles. Instinct and training collided as the reality of engagement hit. Enemies everywhere. Captain Reynolds's voice boomed over the radio. "We're pinned down." Repeat, "Pinned down." Sarah's pulse quickened, but her hands were steady. She peered through her scope, cataloging every movement, marking enemy positions. Insurgents emerged from rooftops, windows, and alleyways, their weapons raised and deadly intent clear. She spoke calmly into her radio. "Left flank clear for repositioning. Watch the right rooftop, movement spotted." Her words grounded the rangers, steadying their nerves even as chaos raged around them. A young ranger, barely 19, cried out as a bullet tore through the wall beside him. He stumbled, nearly losing his footing. Sarah didn't flinch. She lined up her shot, inhaled, and fired, dropping an enemy armed with an RPG. One clean hit, and the immediate threat was gone. She adjusted, scanning the horizon for the next danger. The battle had begun, and survival now relied on her precision, focus, and calm under fire. Mortar fire erupted sporadically, shaking the ground and throwing dust and debris into the air. Sarah was knocked to her knees by a nearby explosion, her rifle half buried in sand. She spat grit from her mouth, wiped blood from her forehead, and climbed back onto a broken wall. Captain Reynolds shouted orders. Fall back. Regroup at the next ridge. But Sarah knew retreat would invite more casualties. She steadied her rifle, scanning for targets, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every shot was calculated, each one buying seconds of safety for her team. Time seemed elastic in the valley. Hours stretched as bullets tore through walls, mortar exploded, and the desert air filled with smoke, dust, and the acrid scent of spent gunpowder. Sarah became the anchor. Her eyes, steady through the scope, identified threats invisible to others. Her voice, calm over the radio, guided her team, directing them away from danger. Reynolds recognized her presence as pivotal. Without her, the mission or survival itself would be in jeopardy. As the sun began its slow descent behind the mountains, shadows lengthened across the battlefield. The valley, once a simple site for observation, had transformed into a deadly chessboard. Every step, every choice, could be fatal. Yet in the midst of chaos, Sarah's resolve never wavered. The young rangers around her drew strength from her example, holding their ground despite fear. Then, the radio crackled again with words that seemed to hang in the air, heavier than any mortar blast. Enemies everywhere. We're pinned down. The valley seemed to close in on them. Dust swirled like a curtain, muting sounds and blurring vision. Yet Sarah, crouched behind her wall, rifle in hand, was the calm center in a storm of bullets. She knew survival was not just skill, but focus, courage, and timing. The mission had shifted irrevocably from reconnaissance to fight for life, and she was ready. Her eyes swept the battlefield once more, taking in every detail. Roofs, alleys, ruined walls, and distant ridges, all potential death traps. Yet each one was also a possible opportunity. She adjusted her scope, checked her ammunition, and whispered under her breath, "We hold. We survive. No one dies today if I can help it." The sun dipped lower, casting the valley in shades of orange and gray, and the first real sense of danger settled fully on the Rangers. What was supposed to be routine had become a fight for survival. And Corporal Sarah Jennings, silent, focused, deadly, would be the one to hold the line. The valley had become a maelstrom of dust, smoke, and the harsh rattle of gunfire. Every structure, every stone, seemed to conceal a hidden threat. The Rangers were pinned, crouched behind walls, rocks, and half-collapsed buildings, scanning desperately for targets. The sound of gunfire echoed off the jagged mountains, bouncing unpredictably, making it almost impossible to determine direction or distance. Bullets whined past ears, kicking up dirt and pebbles with deadly precision. Captain Reynolds shouted through the chaos, "Eyes up. Sectors clear. Cover your angles. Don't bunch up." But his voice was barely audible over the crack of automatic fire and the thump of mortar shells striking nearby. One shell hit an abandoned building just 50 meters away, sending shards of brick and stone into the air like deadly confetti. The Rangers ducked, some staggering backward, coughing dust and smoke. Amid the chaos, the squad's youngest member, Private First Class Miller, froze wide-eyed, clutching his rifle as if it were a lifeline. Crouched behind a low wall, Corporal Sarah Jennings methodically scanned her sector. The dust had reduced visibility to mere meters, yet she didn't falter. Every movement she observed through her scope was catalogued, and processed instantly. The insurgents were skilled, using rooftops and ruins to their advantage, flanking from multiple directions. Her heart rate stayed calm, her breathing controlled, her mind sharp. She wasn't just a sniper, she was the team's anchor. RPG, a voice screamed. Sarah's eyes snapped to a figure on a rooftop, an insurgent raising a rocket-propelled grenade toward the Ranger's Humvee. Time slowed. She adjusted her scope, calculating distance, wind, and trajectory. One slow exhale, one squeeze, and the shot rang out. The insurgent fell, the RPG clattering harmlessly beside him. Relief flashed across the face of the nearby Ranger, but there was no time to celebrate. The enemy wasn't finished. A volley of gunfire erupted from a cluster of buildings to the south. The Rangers tried to move to cover, but every path was met with suppression fire. Reynolds barked into the radio. "We need air support now." "Repeat, we're pinned." "We need extraction." Static answered back, the response delayed and fragmented. Sarah didn't wait. She spotted an enemy combatant attempting to flank the squad from the right and fired a precise shot, dropping him before he could fire. Her calm voice cut through the panic. "Right flank neutralized. Fall back on my mark." Amid the chaos, Private Miller's luck ran out. A bullet tore through the wall beside him, grazing his shoulder. He screamed, stumbling backward into the open, vulnerable. Two more insurgents opened fire from the rooftop above him. Without hesitation, Sarah lined up her scope, adjusted for the distance, and fired twice in rapid succession. Both insurgents fell, leaving Miller alive but shaken. He collapsed to the ground behind cover, panting. "Thanks." "Corporal," he whispered, barely audible over the chaos. Sarah only nodded, scanning the horizon again. There were more threats than she could count, and every second mattered. Mortar continued to explode nearby, sending shrapnel flying in unpredictable patterns. Dust and debris stung skin, filled mouths and eyes, and added another layer of terror to an already overwhelming situation. Reynolds called for the unit to regroup at a safer location near the next ridge, but movement meant exposure. Sarah assessed the battlefield and realized there was a narrow path along the ruins that could give the squad a temporary advantage. "Follow me," she said calmly, motioning with her rifle. "Stay low, move fast, and cover one another." The Rangers obeyed, scrambling along the path while she covered them. Every shot she fired was calculated to create safe windows for movement. She moved with the precision of a predator, scanning every rooftop, doorway, and shadow. A single miscalculation could spell disaster, yet her training and focus kept the team alive. The insurgents were relentless. A burst of fire from the south forced Reynolds to duck behind a wall, narrowly avoiding a bullet that would have struck his chest. He glanced at Sarah and gave a tight nod, silently acknowledging her leadership in this moment of chaos. She returned the nod, adjusting her position and taking another high-percentage shot, neutralizing a gunner preparing to fire on their rear flank. Each pull of the trigger bought precious seconds, moments that allowed the Rangers to inch closer to safety. Private First Class Ramirez, another young Ranger, had been hit by shrapnel from a mortar shell. He lay flat on the ground, groaning in pain, unable to move without risking death. Sarah crawled over, keeping low, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I've got you," she said, voice calm and steady, even as bullets kicked up dust around her. She applied pressure to the wound and instructed him to stay low. Then she returned her focus to the battlefield, scanning for targets. Every second of inaction could cost lives. As the sun climbed higher, the heat combined with the smoke and dust, making every breath a struggle. The Rangers were exhausted, but the enemy did not tire. Sarah noted movement on the far ridge, a group of insurgents attempting to flank them from the left. Adjusting her scope, she calculated the range, accounting for the rising heat, wind, and terrain. She fired a series of precise shots, each one bringing down a target and slowing the enemy's advance. The team began to regroup along the ridge, inching toward a safer position. By midday, it became clear that what had started as a reconnaissance mission had transformed into a full-scale engagement. The Rangers were surrounded, outnumbered, and every pathway threatened. But Sarah remained the constant, the one person the team could rely on to keep them alive. Her calm voice over the radio, her precise shots, and her presence gave the squad the ability to function under impossible stress. Through the chaos, Captain Reynolds made a quick assessment. "We hold here until we can call air support," he said, voice low, tinged with worry. He glanced at Sarah, seeing the steel in her eyes, the unwavering focus. "You're our lifeline, Jennings," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than words. By the afternoon, the squad had successfully moved to a partially fortified position along the ridge. They were battered, breathing heavily, and everybody ached, but all were alive. Sarah crouched behind cover, adjusting her scope, scanning for the next threat. Bullets continued to whistle past, and the faint rumble of mortar fire persisted in the distance. She knew this was only the beginning. The valley was far from silent, and the enemy was far from defeated. She took a deep breath, focusing on the rhythm of the battle. One step at a time, one shot at a time, one breath at a time. Every movement, every decision, every shot could mean life or death for her teammates. And she would not fail. The radio crackled again, the static almost drowned out by the distant gunfire. Reynolds's voice was tight, urgent. "Enemy numbers increasing. We're holding, but barely. Keep your eyes sharp, every sector. Don't give them an inch." Sarah's hand tightened on her rifle. She adjusted her scope, exhaled, and whispered under her breath, "I've got this." We survived today. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The valley had become a crucible, and the Rangers were being tested like never before. But with Sarah Jennings watching over them, steady, precise, and unflinching, they had a fighting chance. And in war, sometimes, that was all that mattered. The valley had become a maelstrom of dust, smoke, and the sharp echo of gunfire. Every rooftop, every wall, every shadow could conceal an enemy. The Rangers huddled behind what little cover they could find along the ridge, checking weapons, assessing injuries, and trying to breathe through the choking dust. Captain Reynolds peered over the edge of a crumbled wall, glancing at Sarah Jennings. "We're pinned down, but we're not dead yet," he muttered. "You see anything?" Sarah adjusted the scope on her sniper rifle, eyes narrowing. The desert stretched before her, a chaotic chessboard of danger and opportunity. She spotted movement, subtle, almost imperceptible, along a ruined wall 30 meters away. Her finger brushed the trigger. She held her breath, waited for the target to align with her crosshairs, and squeezed. The enemy fell, his rifle clattering uselessly to the ground. Sarah exhaled slowly, then scanned the next sector. Every shot was deliberate, calculated, saving lives by the second. From her vantage point, Sarah could see the battlefield like a living map. The insurgents were well-trained, flanking from multiple directions, using buildings, walls, and shallow trenches as cover. One group was attempting to approach from the west ridge. Another was climbing the rubble of a collapsed watchtower, positioning themselves to rain fire on the Rangers' extraction path. She quickly calculated range, wind speed, and bullet drop, visualizing the trajectory. One quick squeeze, and a gunner on the ridge dropped. Another second shot took out an insurgent trying to climb the tower. Each precise hit brought the Rangers a fraction closer to survival. "Snipers nest clear, left flank moving up," Sarah called over the radio, her voice calm despite the chaos. The young ranger's eyes brightened. Her presence was the anchor holding them together. Private First Class Miller, still shaking from his earlier graze, peeked over a wall and whispered, "She's saving us, sir. Every shot counts." Captain Reynolds nodded silently, recognizing the truth in the boy's words. Sarah wasn't just a marksman. She was the lifeline of the squad. The enemy grew more desperate as the afternoon wore on. Mortar continued to fall sporadically, sending clouds of sand into the air, reducing visibility to a few meters. Insurgents began moving more aggressively, attempting to encircle the Rangers completely. Sarah's mind raced, not with fear, but with calculations, distance, angles, bullet trajectory, enemy patterns. She moved methodically along the ridge, adjusting her position with minimal exposure, each step measured and deliberate. Every shot she took created breathing room for her team to reposition. A new threat appeared on the horizon. A small group of insurgents, trying to take control of a narrow alley that could cut the Rangers off from their fallback point. Sarah's eyes locked on them. They were heavily armed, unaware of her presence. She breathed deeply, stabilizing her aim, and fired twice in rapid succession. 2 insurgents fell silently into the dust. The remaining group faltered, confused and panicked. The Rangers seized the moment, pushing forward along the ridge to secure their position. Amid the firefight, Sarah noticed Private Ramirez, wounded earlier by shrapnel, struggling to reload. She crawled quickly beside him, keeping low, and whispered instructions. "Stay calm. Focus. I've got your back." Ramirez nodded, taking careful aim at a distant target. Sarah watched over him, covering the sector, picking off enemies that threatened their flank. Every action was coordinated, every shot a life saved. The chaos continued, but Sarah's sniper's eye turned the battlefield from a death trap into a calculated engagement. Captain Reynolds radioed command, requesting air support and artillery, but the response would take time. Until then, the Rangers relied entirely on themselves and Sarah. She shifted to another vantage point, crawling along a low ridge of rubble, using shadows to mask her movement. Through the dust and smoke, she spotted the insurgent leader, distinguishable by his uniform and the way he coordinated his fighters. He was the linchpin of the attack. If he fell, confusion would ripple through the enemy ranks. She calculated the impossible shot, range over 900 meters, wind gusting unpredictably, elevation uneven. Sarah steadied her rifle, recalling every drill, every training exercise. Breath control, trigger squeeze, wind compensation. Time slowed. The world condensed into the crosshairs, the target, and the pulse of her own heartbeat. Exhaling slowly, she fired. The shot was true. The leader fell. Panic and disorder rippled through the enemy forces. Shots rang out in all directions, but the rhythm had shifted. The Rangers pressed their advantage, moving along the ridge with renewed confidence. The young soldiers looked to her with awe. "Did you see that?" Miller whispered, shaking his head. Sarah didn't answer. She was already scanning the next sector, calculating the movement of remaining threats. Each shot she fired, each target she eliminated, bought another second, another inch of ground, another chance at survival. The dust hung thick in the air, clinging to sweat and blood. The valley had become a blur of motion and noise, yet she remained steady, the calm in the storm. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Sarah remained focused, crawling, shifting, firing. She neutralized a sniper, attempting to take the Rangers' overwatch position, dropped a machine gunner threatening their left flank, and created space for Reynolds to reorganize his men. Her skill was uncanny, her timing perfect. The enemy began to realize that someone unseen was picking them off with terrifying precision. The tide of battle was slowly turning. Despite exhaustion, Sarah did not waver. Her fingers were calloused, her shoulders sore, but her mind was sharp, tuned to the rhythm of the valley. She whispered coordinates to her teammates over the radio, guiding them through the chaos. Every move she made had purpose, a chess game where each bullet was a decisive move. The Rangers followed her lead, moving strategically, covering each other's blind spots and advancing inch by inch. By late afternoon, the squad had secured a temporary stronghold along the ridge. The enemy had suffered casualties, some retreating in disarray, others hesitant to advance. The Rangers breathed, but only for a moment. Mortar still fell, bullets still flew, and the valley remained a hostile, unpredictable landscape. Yet thanks to Sarah Jennings, the team had survived, regrouped, and gained a tactical edge. Her calm, precise actions had shifted the battle from near-certain disaster to a fight with hope. Captain Reynolds looked at her across the ridge, seeing the dust and sweat streaking her face, the intense focus in her eyes. "You've saved lives today, Jennings," he said quietly. She only nodded, voice calm, unwavering. "We keep moving," she said, already scanning the horizon, rifle ready. In the valley of death and dust, she had become the one constant, the quiet force that held the Rangers together. And as the sun began its descent, casting orange-red light across the battlefield, Sarah's eyes never left the enemy positions. The fight was far from over, but for now, the sniper's calm had made all the difference. The valley seemed to breathe around the Rangers, dust and heat rising in waves, carrying the echoes of gunfire and the occasional distant scream. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting elongated shadows across the jagged terrain, turning the sand into a blinding gold. The squad huddled behind what little cover the ridge provided, scanning the battlefield through the haze. But the enemy, emboldened and relentless, had not yet shown mercy. A sudden, thunderous explosion shook the ground beneath them. The world erupted in a storm of debris, sand, and smoke. Mortar fire had found its mark close to the Rangers' position. Private Ramirez was thrown to the ground, coughing, clutching a wound in his leg. Private Miller barely rolled to safety, his eyes wide in shock. The sound of tearing metal and breaking stone filled the air, mingling with the panicked shouts of the men. Sarah Jennings hit the ground hard as a wave of debris slammed into her side. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, and the acrid scent of burning metal and dust filled her lungs. For a heartbeat, disorientation threatened to overwhelm her, but instinct took over. She rolled behind a crumbled wall, dragging her rifle with her, and quickly checked herself for injury. A cut streaked her forehead, and her arm throbbed where a shard of rock had grazed her skin. She ignored the pain. She had no choice. The Ranger's survival depended on her focus, not her fear. Captain Reynolds' voice rang over the chaos. "Fall back. Regroup at the next ridge." His words carried urgency and dread. The team needed to move, but every direction was under fire. Sarah assessed the battlefield. The mortar fire had created a dangerous new zone, and the enemy was taking advantage of the confusion to flank their left side. She quickly mapped a path, low and protected, that would allow the squad to reposition without exposing themselves to concentrated fire. "Cover me," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the thrum of panic in the air. She climbed partially over the wall, scanning rooftops and alleyways, picking off targets who threatened to block the squad's path. Her rifle was an extension of her senses. Every movement, every shot was calculated to buy time. One insurgent raising a machine gun on a distant ridge fell to her precision, the bullet striking true. Another stumbled as her second round found its mark. "Move, move, move," Reynolds shouted. The squad obeyed, crawling and sprinting in short bursts along the path Sarah had identified. Dust stung their eyes and mouths. Sweat mixed with blood streaked their faces. and yet they moved with purpose. Sarah provided covering fire, guiding them through the death trap. Her calm voice over the radio anchored the team, preventing panic from spreading. Every second was precious. Every shot could save a life. Amid the chaos, Sarah spotted an insurgent preparing to throw a grenade at the Rangers' rear flank. The soldier had no idea she was watching. Without hesitation, Sarah fired. The enemy went down instantly, a grenade dropping harmlessly into the dust. Private Miller exhaled audibly behind her. How did you see that?" he muttered. Sarah didn't answer. She only continued scanning, already calculating the next threat. There was no time for questions, no room for hesitation. The squad reached a temporary cover point, a series of ruined walls, partially shielding them from fire. Injured soldiers were tending to each other as best they could, improvising bandages from torn clothing and applying pressure to stop bleeding. Mortar shells continued to strike sporadically, sending clouds of dust and small fragments flying. Every step, every breath, was a reminder of how fragile life had become in this valley. Yet even as exhaustion set in, Sarah remained steady. Her mind was a machine, analyzing, predicting, and neutralizing danger before it reached the squad. A sudden burst of fire erupted from a rooftop not far from their position. One of the younger Rangers fell, taking a grazing shot across his chest. Sarah reacted instantly, raising her rifle and firing 2 rapid rounds that neutralized the enemy gunner. The squad breathed as one, temporarily shielded by her marksmanship. Captain Reynolds glanced at her, noting the slight streak of blood on her forehead, the grit in her eyes, and the calm focus that belied the chaos surrounding them. "Jennings, keep doing what you're doing," he said quietly, almost reverently. But the danger was far from over. More insurgents were moving into the valley, attempting to encircle the Rangers completely. Sarah knew that if they didn't move soon, the squad could be trapped with no avenue of escape. She crawled along the ridge to a better vantage point, using shadows to mask her movement. Her rifle tracked the enemy, picking off targets with surgical precision. 1, 2, 3. Each shot disrupted the enemy's advance, providing a sliver of breathing room. Despite the pounding adrenaline, Sarah felt fatigue creeping into her limbs. Her shoulder burned from the recoil, her arms trembled slightly from holding her position for hours, and her lungs screamed for clean air. Yet she pushed the discomfort aside. There was no room for weakness. The squad's lives depended on her. She whispered instructions over the radio, directing their movements, marking enemy positions, and coordinating defensive fire. Each word was measured, precise, meant to maximize survival. Hours seemed to stretch into an eternity. Mortar continued to fall, and insurgent fire showed no sign of relenting. Yet thanks to Sarah's calm amid the storm, the Rangers had survived the worst of the engagement. She had held the line, repelled flanking attempts, and provided the focus that allowed the squad to maneuver despite being outnumbered and outgunned. By late afternoon, the squad reached a slightly more defensible position, partially shielded from direct fire. Injuries had been tended to as best they could, and for the moment, the team caught their breath. Captain Reynolds looked at Sarah, noting the blood streaks across her face, the grit coating her uniform, and the unwavering intensity in her eyes. "You saved us today," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Sarah only nodded, her focus already shifting to the next threat. There would be no rest, not yet. The valley was far from silent. Dust hung thick, punctuated by occasional gunfire, the distant thump of mortar, and the murmur of the enemy regrouping. Sarah adjusted her scope, scanning relentlessly. Each shadow, each flicker of movement was a potential threat. Yet she remained calm, steady, precise. Her presence gave the Rangers the confidence to endure the unending assault, to survive where others might falter. As the sun sank lower, casting the valley in deep red and orange hues. Sarah's eyes never left the battlefield. She had been struck, she was bleeding, and her muscles ached, but she did not falter. Every shot, every calculation, every decision carried weight, and she would not allow a single life under her watch to be lost to chaos. In the heat of the late afternoon, as shadows stretched long across the valley, the quiet thought crossed her mind, "We survived today, and I will make sure of it." The valley seemed endless, a shifting battlefield of dust, rocks, and crumbling ruins. The sun hovered low, casting long shadows that flickered across the terrain, giving movement to every corner, every wall, every ruin. The Rangers huddled behind what little cover they could find, their uniforms streaked with blood and dust. Mortar continued to crash nearby, punctuating the chaos with deafening explosions, sending clouds of grit and debris into the air. Every breath was hot, every heartbeat loud, every step a calculated risk. Corporal Sarah Jennings crouched behind a low wall, her sniper rifle resting against her shoulder. She scanned the valley with methodical precision. Through the lens of her scope, she could see the enemy's coordination unraveling slightly. The insurgent commander, the linchpin of the attack, had positioned himself atop a distant ridge, gesturing and shouting orders. If he survived, the Rangers would remain trapped in a deadly stalemate. Her pulse remained steady, despite the exhaustion creeping into her muscles, despite the dust and blood clinging to her face. This was the shot that could turn everything. She calculated quickly. Distance, over 900 meters. Wind gusting unpredictably. The range was beyond comfort for a standard sniper, yet not beyond possibility for someone with her skill. Sarah remembered every drill, every lesson, every late-night training session. Breath control, trigger squeeze, wind compensation, elevation adjustment. All of it had led to this moment. She exhaled slowly, settled her cheek against the stock, and lined up her crosshairs. The valley seemed to fall silent. Click, the shot rang out. The bullet arced through the hot desert air with deadly accuracy. The insurgent commander fell, toppling backward down the ridge. Confusion erupted in his ranks. Insurgent soldiers paused, unsure how to respond without guidance. The rhythm of the battle shifted instantly. The Rangers seized the opportunity. Captain Reynolds barked orders, coordinating movements the squad had rehearsed in drills, taking advantage of the enemy's momentary disarray. Sarah didn't relax. She adjusted her position, scanning the ridge and rooftops for the next target. A machine gunner, exposed while attempting to regroup, rose briefly above cover. Sarah fired twice, each round striking true. Another insurgent, attempting to flank the Rangers' left, fell into the dust. Each shot she took was a calculated intervention, keeping her team alive while slowly dismantling the enemy's offensive. The tide of battle, previously slipping from the Rangers' control, was beginning to turn. Private First Class Miller, still shaking from earlier injuries, whispered, "How? How is she doing this?" Another young Ranger, Ramirez, barely able to stand, murmured, "She's saving us." Every shot counts. Sarah's eyes didn't waver from the battlefield. She didn't seek praise. Survival, precision, timing, these were her only concerns. The valley was unforgiving, but her focus remained unbroken. Mortar fire continued in the distance, yet the Rangers moved with new confidence. Sarah's shots created openings, allowing the squad to advance along the ridge, consolidating positions that had been nearly lost. She called out enemy positions, marking targets for her team, coordinating movements like a conductor guiding an orchestra of chaos. Each command was calm, deliberate, and effective. The young soldiers followed her guidance, moving in unison, covering one another, advancing despite exhaustion and fear. The insurgents, realizing their commander was gone and their units fractured, began to falter. Sarah's focus remained unshaken. She spotted another key threat, a sniper attempting to take out the Rangers' overwatch position. With a breath, she aimed, calculated wind and distance, and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang true, neutralizing the sniper before he could fire. The squad's morale lifted, a small but vital victory amid the unrelenting chaos. Captain Reynolds glanced at her, all evident in his eyes. "Jennings, that shot just saved all of us," he muttered under his breath. Sarah only nodded, already adjusting her scope, already searching for the next threat. She was relentless, precise, unyielding. Her actions had given the Rangers a fighting chance in a battle that had once seemed unwinnable. The valley, once dominated by enemy fire, now echoed with the sound of the Rangers' advance. They moved with purpose, consolidating positions and tending to the wounded, using the brief lull in enemy fire to catch their breath. Sarah crouched behind her wall, breathing slowly, scanning every ridge, every rooftop, every ruin. Her rifle was ready, her mind unbroken. The enemy might be regrouping, but she was ready. She spotted a group attempting to advance along the far ridge, flanking her team. Calculating range, elevation, and wind, she fired 3 rapid shots. Each hit disrupted the enemy, forcing them to halt and seek cover. The Rangers used this opportunity to move forward, securing a previously exposed section of the ridge. Every inch gained was another step toward survival, another testament to Sarah's skill and determination. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows and bathing the valley in orange-red light. Dust clung to sweat-streaked faces, and exhaustion weighed on every soldier. Yet hope had returned, fragile but real. The impossible shot, the one that had toppled the insurgent commander, had shifted the battle. The Rangers now had the momentum, a fighting chance to survive and push back against the enemy assault. Despite the brief sense of relief, Sarah remained vigilant. Her eyes never left the battlefield. Every shadow, every flicker of movement was a potential threat. She whispered coordinates to her team over the radio, guiding their repositioning and preparing for the next wave. The valley had claimed much, but it had not claimed her resolve. By early evening, the Rangers had established a more defensible position along the ridge. Injuries were tended as best they could, positions consolidated, and morale lifted slightly by Sarah's actions. Captain Reynolds looked at her, seeing not just a sniper, but the force that had kept them alive through hours of chaos. "You're the reason we're still standing," he said quietly. Sarah only nodded, her gaze already returning to the horizon, aware that the fight was far from over. The impossible shot had not only neutralized a key threat, but had given the Rangers the opportunity to regain control. The insurgents were disoriented. The squad now had breathing room, and the valley, while still dangerous, was slowly tilting in favor of the defenders. Sarah Jennings, exhausted, bloodied, and unflinching, had changed the course of the battle. Her precision, calm, and unwavering focus had turned the tide. As the sun sank behind the mountains, shadows deepened, and the valley held its breath. The Rangers had survived the worst of the day's fighting, but they all knew the night would bring new dangers. Sarah adjusted her scope one last time, scanning the horizon, whispering under her breath, "We survived today, and we keep fighting tomorrow." The sun had nearly disappeared behind the jagged mountains, leaving the Helmand Valley bathed in an eerie orange and crimson glow. Shadows stretched across the ridges and ruins, merging into dark pockets where threats could be hiding. The air was thick with dust, sweat, and the metallic tang of spent gunpowder. The Rangers had managed to secure a defensible position along a central ridge, but the danger was far from over. Captain Reynolds gathered his squad briefly, scanning the horizon. "We hold here, regroup, and prepare for a counterattack," he ordered. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of exhaustion and urgency. The squad obeyed, crawling into positions behind rubble and natural cover. Injured soldiers were assisted by their peers, bandages improvised from torn uniforms, and pressure applied to bleeding wounds. The team's morale, though battered, was slowly recovering thanks to the earlier sniper actions that had disrupted the insurgents' command. Corporal Sarah Jennings remained behind the highest ridge point, her rifle ready, eyes scanning the shadows. Even as dusk settled, she did not relax. The valley, now cloaked in the dying light, was a maze of potential ambush points. Every ruin, every shadow, could conceal a hostile presence. Sarah's steady hand and calm demeanor became the lifeline for the squad. She whispered over the radio, guiding movements and providing target coordinates for covering fire. Left flank clear. Watch the roofline to the east. Move low, stay tight, she instructed. The insurgents, shaken by the loss of their commander, and the precise sniper fire, had begun to regroup, attempting a flanking maneuver to cut the Rangers off from the valley exit. Sarah's eyes caught subtle movement on the far ridge, 3 figures moving with military precision toward the squad's left. She calculated the angles, distance, and wind, raising her rifle. One quick breath, and she fired. One insurgent dropped, the others scattered in confusion. Her precision allowed the Rangers to maintain their defensive line, preventing encirclement. Captain Reynolds took advantage of the enemy's momentary hesitation. "Team, counterattack. Push forward along the ridge," he commanded. The Rangers moved cautiously, covering one another, advancing toward the insurgents' disrupted positions. Mortar had quieted, but sniper fire continued sporadically from unknown locations. Sarah covered the advance, picking off key targets and signaling for her squad to move behind her protective overwatch. The valley seemed to twist and shift in, the fading light, each shadow appearing more menacing than the last. Dust rose with every step, carried by the hot, dry wind. Sarah adjusted her scope repeatedly, scanning every rooftop, every ruin, every alley. Her body ached from hours of combat, from crawling, firing, and constant vigilance. But the exhaustion did not diminish her focus. She was the eyes and ears of the squad, the one who could neutralize threats before they reached her team. As the Rangers advanced, they encountered enemy resistance in a partially collapsed building. Insurgents opened fire from the second floor, catching a young soldier in the crossfire. He dropped to the ground, groaning in pain. Sarah fired from her vantage point, eliminating the shooter before he could reload. Reynolds signaled the squad to flank the building, while Sarah provided continuous covering fire. Every second she held, every target she neutralized, gave the team a tactical edge. Night was falling fast. The valley, once illuminated by the orange glow of sunset, was now a landscape of deep shadows and murky shapes. Visibility dropped dramatically. The insurgents used the darkness to their advantage, hiding among ruins, attempting to regroup for a counterstrike. Sarah adjusted her scope to account for the fading light, her sharp eyes catching movements that others might miss. She was the squad's shield, the unseen guardian in a night that promised chaos. A new threat emerged from a collapsed wall on the far ridge, an insurgent with a machine gun moving to suppress the Rangers' advance. Sarah calculated the shot carefully. Distance, trajectory, wind, and elevation all factored in. Her first round hit the enemy's weapon mount, disarming him. A second shot ensured he would not rise again. The squad moved forward under her protective fire, gaining ground and consolidating their newly established positions. Captain Reynolds glanced at the horizon, noting the shadows of insurgents attempting to regroup on distant ridges. "Jennings, watch the eastern approach. Everyone else, hold here," he ordered. Sarah complied immediately, adjusting her position for maximum visibility while minimizing exposure. From her vantage point, She could see the valley stretching into darkness, every ridge and ruin potentially concealing deadly intent. The young rangers, exhausted but encouraged by the tactical gains, moved under her guidance, patching injuries, reloading, and preparing for the inevitable next wave. Mortar had fallen silent for now, but insurgent snipers were still active. Sarah's focus never wavered. Her calm precision allowed the squad to function as a unit, despite fatigue and fear. Every shot she took, every movement she coordinated, reinforced the Rangers' survival. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. Darkness enveloped the valley completely. The Rangers, though bruised and battered, had pushed the enemy back slightly, gaining a temporary advantage. Sarah adjusted her scope, listening to the faint rustle of movement, feeling the vibration of distant footsteps, predicting threats before they reached her squad. Her presence remained the fulcrum upon which the squad's survival balanced. As night deepened, the insurgents attempted one final push, moving silently through the ruins under cover of darkness. Sarah spotted movement from her broken wall 30 meters away, 3 insurgents attempting to ambush the Rangers' left flank. She fired in rapid succession, neutralizing 2 and forcing the 3rd to retreat into the shadows. Her precision bought the Rangers the time to reposition defensively, securing the ridge and creating a small but vital stronghold in the valley. Captain Reynolds exhaled, his eyes scanning the ridge. "Hold this line. We push at first light," he said quietly. The Rangers, exhausted but alive, settled into temporary defensive positions. Injuries were patched as best they could, weapons reloaded, and eyes scanned for threats in the inky blackness. Sarah, still alert and vigilant, continued to watch over the valley, scanning for any remaining enemy activity. Through the long night, the valley remained tense and dangerous. Mortar could fall without warning. Snipers could target the ridge at any moment, and hidden insurgents could strike from the shadows. Yet, thanks to Sarah Jennings' unwavering focus and expert marksmanship, the squad had not only survived, but had regained a tactical advantage. Her calm presence in the dying light had turned a near defeat into a fighting chance, giving the Rangers the confidence to endure the night and prepare for the counterattack at dawn. As the stars began to emerge above the valley, the squad huddled silently, listening to the distant rustle of movement, the whisper of wind across the ridges, and the subtle thrum of tension that never truly disappeared. Sarah adjusted her rifle, scanning the darkness. Her face was streaked with sweat, dirt, and blood, yet her eyes remained sharp, unwavering. The night was long, the enemy cunning, but the Rangers had hope. And hope, guided by precision and courage, was their greatest weapon. Dawn broke over the Helmand Valley, casting pale, cold light across the jagged ridges and shattered ruins. The night had been long, filled with tension, whispered instructions, and the quiet hum of vigilance. Shadows lingered, concealing potential threats, but the Rangers were ready. Captain Reynolds gathered his squad for a quick briefing. Their position along the ridge gave them an advantage, but the enemy, though battered and disoriented, remained dangerous. Sarah Jennings crouched on the ridge, sniper rifle in hand, scanning the valley. Her muscles ached from the long night of vigilance. Her uniform caked with dust and blood, but her mind remained razor-sharp. Through the lens of her scope, she could see the enemy attempting to regroup at the far end of the valley. Their commander long gone, but remnants of their force still organized enough to pose a serious threat. "All right, team," Reynolds said quietly. "We move forward, reclaim the valley, and push these insurgents back. Follow our sectors. Cover each other. And watch for movement. They won't give up easily." The Rangers nodded, weapons ready, adrenaline pumping despite exhaustion. Every movement would need to be precise, every shot calculated. The counterattack was dangerous, but it was their only chance to seize control. Sarah's voice cut over the radio, calm and steady. Left flank clear. Right flank, watch for rooftop snipers. I'll cover the center. Her tone gave the squad confidence. Her presence had been a lifeline throughout the battle, and now, as the first light of day touched the valley floor, she would lead them in reclaiming it. The Rangers moved in short, deliberate bursts, advancing along the ridge while maintaining cover. Mortar had been mostly silenced, but scattered gunfire erupted from the ruins below. Sarah adjusted her scope, tracking movement among the enemy ranks. A machine gunner on a distant roof aimed toward the Rangers' left flank. Sarah fired, the shot precise and deadly. The gunner slumped, and the squad moved forward a few more meters, taking advantage of the opening. Private Miller, still shaken from his previous wounds, whispered to Ramirez, "We actually might survive this." His voice trailed off as another shot ricocheted near their position. Sarah, hearing the whisper, didn't respond, but her calm, steady fire allowed the two young Rangers to advance under cover. Her precise intervention gave the squad both breathing room and confidence. The insurgents, realizing the Rangers were now moving offensively, scrambled to reinforce positions in the valley. Sarah picked out targets: a sniper attempting to climb a partially destroyed watchtower, an RPG team setting up behind rubble, and a small squad trying to flank from the valley floor. Each threat she neutralized with a single shot, the enemy faltering under the sudden pressure and precision of her fire. Reynolds signaled the squad to push toward a ruined compound in the valley center, where insurgents had been holding strategic positions. The Rangers moved low, using debris and rocks for cover, while Sarah's watchful eye eliminated threats before they could react. Her ability to anticipate enemy movement kept the squad safe, her focus unbroken even as her body screamed for rest. As they neared the compound, the enemy became desperate. A sudden burst of fire pinned down the Rangers' right flank. Private Ramirez groaned as he was grazed by shrapnel. Sarah quickly calculated the trajectory to the enemy position, firing 3 precise rounds that neutralized the immediate threat. The squad seized the opportunity, storming forward to secure the compound. Inside, insurgents scrambled to regroup, but were met with relentless precision fire from Sarah, covering their advance. Captain Reynolds moved through the squad, coordinating positions and calling out sectors. "Clear the roof. Watch the stairwell. Cover the windows," he shouted. The Rangers, following his lead and guided by Sarah's sniper oversight, systematically cleared the compound. Sarah continued to provide overwatch from a ridge above, her eyes scanning for any movement that could threaten the squad. Every shot she fired disrupted enemy plans, forcing retreats and opening paths for her team. Suddenly, an insurgent attempted a flanking maneuver from the east side of the compound, moving under a low wall. Sarah tracked him immediately, calculating distance and wind. A single silent shot brought him down before he could reach the squad. Miller and Ramirez, still recovering from their earlier injuries, exchanged glances of disbelief. "She sees everything," Miller whispered. Sarah adjusted her position without acknowledging them, already scanning for the next threat. By late morning, the Rangers had cleared much of the compound and secured critical high ground around it. Enemy fire was sporadic, disorganized, and largely ineffective due to the relentless pressure from Sarah's precision shots. Captain Reynolds looked across the valley, noting the reduced enemy presence. "Jennings, take the ridge. Cover the team while we push the remaining pockets," he ordered. Sarah complied immediately, moving to a vantage point that provided both range and protection. The final phase of the battle was brutal. Insurgents, cornered and desperate, launched one last coordinated attack, attempting to reclaim the compound. Sarah identified the key threats: a machine gun team moving along the rubble, a sniper attempting to climb to a higher vantage point, and several insurgents advancing directly toward the squad. She fired rapidly, neutralizing the machine gun team and the sniper, buying critical seconds for the Rangers to regroup and mount a defensive line. The Rangers counterattacked in unison, storming the remaining enemy positions. Shouts, gunfire, and the smell of gunpowder filled the valley. Sarah covered every movement, her rifle picking off targets before they could pose a threat. Each shot disrupted enemy coordination, creating openings for her squad to advance. The valley, once dominated by the insurgents, was now slipping from their control entirely. Exhaustion weighed heavily on the squad, but victory was in sight. Sarah's calm and precise interventions had not only kept the Rangers alive, but had turned the tide of the battle. Enemy resistance faltered under the relentless combination of coordinated squad movements and her sniper oversight. Slowly, inch by inch, the Rangers reclaimed the valley. By early afternoon, the battle had effectively ended. The remaining insurgents, disoriented and leaderless, retreated into the surrounding mountains. The Rangers, battered, bloodied, and exhausted, consolidated their positions. Captain Reynolds approached Sarah, noting the dirt and blood streaking her face and uniform. "Jennings, we couldn't have done this without you," he said, voice filled with gratitude and awe. She only nodded, scanning the horizon, still alert, still ready. The valley was quiet at last, save for the occasional distant echo of retreating forces. The Rangers had survived against overwhelming odds, thanks in large part to Sarah Jennings' unwavering focus, unmatched precision, and calm under pressure. Her sniper rifle, once a tool of distant lethality, had become the guardian of their survival, turning a battle that could have ended in disaster into a decisive counterattack and eventual victory. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah finally allowed herself a deep breath. Her body was aching, her eyes strained, her hands sore, but the squad had survived. The valley, once a landscape of death and uncertainty, now belonged to the Rangers. They had endured, they had fought back, and they had emerged victorious. Sarah's presence had made all the difference. A sniper who had seen everything, predicted everything, and acted without hesitation, saving lives with every shot. The Helmand Valley was finally quiet. The distant echoes of retreating insurgents had faded, leaving only the hum of wind across the ridges and the low murmur of the surviving Rangers. Dust hung thick in the air, clinging to sweat, blood, and fatigue-streaked uniforms. The valley that had been a battlefield now felt eerily calm, a surreal contrast to the chaos of the last 48 hours. Captain Reynolds surveyed the scene. The Rangers were battered, some wounded, but alive. Each had fought with courage, but there was no denying that survival had hinged on one constant: Corporal Sarah Jennings. Her sniper rifle, once an instrument of deadly precision from afar, had become the team's shield, their anchor amid the storm. She had neutralized threats, coordinated movements, and kept the squad alive through sheer skill and unyielding focus. Sarah leaned against a ruined wall, rifle resting across her knees. Her body ached, her uniform was torn and streaked with dirt and blood, yet her eyes were calm and alert, scanning the horizon for any lingering threat. Private Miller approached hesitantly, still wide-eyed from the intensity of the battle. "Ma'am, you saved all of us," he whispered. Sarah only nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. Praise wasn't necessary. Survival was enough. Medical personnel had arrived by helicopter, beginning triage on the injured. Private Ramirez, with a shallow shrapnel wound on his leg, was stabilized first, followed by several others with minor injuries. The Rangers moved methodically, checking weapons, cleaning wounds, and ensuring every soldier was accounted for. Throughout the chaos, Sarah remained vigilant, scanning the valley for potential hidden dangers. She had trained for hours in harsh conditions, yet the real battlefield demanded more than training. It demanded instinct, precision, and the willingness to act without hesitation. Captain Reynolds finally approached her, removing his cap and taking a deep breath. "Jennings, I don't know what to say. You've done more than any of us could have imagined. You saved lives. You saved me. You saved this squad." Sarah looked at him, eyes weary but steady. She shook her head slightly. "We survived because we worked together. I just did my part." Her humility belied the truth. Without her sniper oversight, without her calm amid chaos, the outcome could have been catastrophic. The helicopter hovered above the ridge, kicking up dust and sand. One by one, the Rangers climbed aboard, wounded and weary, but alive. Sarah helped guide the injured, checking to ensure none were left behind. As she climbed into the helicopter last, she glanced back at the valley, the jagged ridges, the crumbled buildings, and the silent reminders of the battle. Each step, each shot, each decision had mattered. The weight of responsibility was heavy, yet she bore it silently. Once airborne, the squad allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The sun had risen higher, painting the valley in stark morning light, revealing the scars of battle in vivid detail. Buildings were shattered, walls reduced to rubble, and scorch marks lined the ridge. The physical destruction mirrored the psychological toll on the squad, yet a sense of accomplishment lingered. They had survived where defeat had seemed inevitable, and they owed that survival in large part to Sarah Jennings. The return to base was quiet, reflective. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones, recounting moments of terror, triumph, and relief. Sarah remained largely silent, listening to the murmurs and glances of gratitude exchanged among her comrades. Captain Reynolds made a point of formally recognizing her contributions during the debriefing. "Corporal Jennings' actions went above and beyond," he stated. "Her marksmanship, tactical awareness, and calm under fire saved every life in this squad. She is the reason we are all here today." Even as commendations were discussed, Sarah felt no need for recognition. Her focus was always on the mission, on the team, on survival. Yet those around her saw the heroism she downplayed. Young soldiers like Miller and Ramirez looked at her with awe, understanding that her precision, courage, and unwavering composure had turned a deadly ambush into a successful extraction. To them, Sarah was not just a sniper. She was a guardian, a protector, a symbol of hope amidst chaos. Back at the base, awards and honors were formally presented. Captain Reynolds handed Sarah a commendation, noting her bravery and extraordinary contribution under fire. Photographs were taken, records filed, but Sarah remained modest, allowing others to celebrate her actions without fanfare. She knew the battlefield demanded quiet heroism, deeds that mattered more than recognition. Every life she saved was the reward she sought. As the sun set on the base, Sarah found a quiet moment to herself. She cleaned her rifle meticulously, methodically wiping away dust and residue from the battlefield. Her mind replayed the last 2 days, the mortar blasts, the dust-choked air, the impossible shots, and the moments when seconds had made the difference between life and death. Each memory carried weight, but also pride. She had done what was necessary, without hesitation, without doubt. In the mess hall later, the squad shared a subdued meal. Laughter and conversation were rare, replaced by the quiet camaraderie of soldiers who had faced near-certain death together. Captain Reynolds raised a cup to the team, acknowledging the collective effort but glancing at Sarah as he did. To survival, to courage, and to Jennings, whose calm and precision saved us all. The squad echoed the toast, voices full of respect, gratitude, and quiet relief. As night fell over the base, Sarah stood alone outside, looking at the stars. The valley lay behind her, silent and scarred, a reminder of both the horrors and triumphs of combat. She allowed herself a rare moment of reflection, feeling the exhaustion, the tension, and the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. though accolades were given and gratitude expressed. She knew the true measure of her actions lay in the lives she had preserved. The helicopter ride home, the awards, the recognition, all of it was secondary. What mattered most was the quiet knowledge that in the chaos of dust, gunfire, and uncertainty, she had remained steady. She had acted decisively, saved lives, and given her squad a fighting chance where none seemed possible. That quiet heroism, unnoticed by many, would stay with her long after the battle had ended. And so, as the stars shone above the base and the world around her finally found calm, Corporal Sarah Jennings allowed herself a single deep breath. She had faced the impossible, endured the unthinkable, and emerged as both protector and survivor. The valley, scarred and silent, held the story of her heroism, a story of precision, courage, and unwavering focus in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle was over, but its lessons would endure. The Rangers had survived because one soldier, unseen and often unpraised, had held the line when it mattered most. Her story would be told quietly among those who lived it, a testament to the power of calm, courage, and decisive action under fire. And in the quiet of the night, Sarah Jennings finally allowed herself to relax, knowing she had done everything she could to ensure that every life she could save had been saved. Her rifle rested nearby, still ready, her eyes reflecting both the weight of the battle and the quiet satisfaction of duty fulfilled.